Greetings, everyone. This is your friend, Pastor Mark, bringing you now chapters 29 and 30 of The Hiding Place. I don't think I'm centered in the camera. There we go. Anyhow, this is a production of the Bible Broadcasting Network, and we sure appreciate them allowing us to share this with you. They can be reached at bbnradio.org or by phone at 1-800-888-7077. Now let's begin with chapters 29 and 30.
Pause, F-bar button, Alt, P, Control plus P.
From the studios of the Bible Broadcasting Network, we present Christian Classics, reading from a book that has influenced the lives of many people. Our narrator is Lynn Brooks.
Today we'll be reading chapter 29 from The Hiding Place. Betsy drew the little cloth bag from beneath her overalls and held it out to me, but I shook my head. Betsy kept the Bible during the day since she had more chance to read and teach from it here than I did at the Phillips Barracks. In the evenings, we held a clandestine prayer meeting for as many as could crowd around our bunk. You lead the prayers tonight, Betsy. I have a headache. More than a headache. All of me ached with the violence of my feelings about the man who had done us so much harm. That night, I did not sleep, and the next day at my bench scarcely heard the conversation around me. By the end of the week, I had worked myself into such a sickness of body and spirit that Mr. Mormon stopped at my bench to ask if something were wrong. Wrong? Yes, something's wrong, and I plunged into
Exiting narrator.
I was only too eager to tell Mr. Mormon and all Holland how John Vogel had betrayed his country. What puzzled me all this time was Betsy. She had suffered everything I had, and yet she seemed to carry no burden of rage. Betsy, I hissed, one dark night when I knew that my restless tossing must be keeping her awake. 3 of us now shared this single cot as the crowded camp daily received new arrivals. Betsy, don't you feel anything about John Vogel? Doesn't it bother you? Oh, yes, Corey. Terribly. I've felt for him ever since I knew, and pray for him whenever his name comes into my mind. How dreadfully he must be suffering. For a long time I lay silent in the huge, shadowy barracks, restless with the sighs, snores, and stirrings of hundreds of women. Once again I had the feeling that this sister, with whom I had spent all my life, belonged somehow to another order of beings. Wasn't she telling me, in her gentle way, that I was as guilty as John Vogel? Didn't he and I stand together before an all-seeing God, convicted of the same sin of murder? For I had murdered him with my heart and with my tongue. Lord Jesus, I whispered into the lumpy ticking of the bed. I forgive John Vogel, as I pray that you will forgive me. I have done him great damage. Bless him now, and his family. That night, for the first time since our betrayer had a name, I slept deep and dreamlessly until the whistle summoned us to roll call. The days in Voot were a baffling mixture of good and bad. Morning roll call was often cruelly long. If the smallest rule had been broken, such as a single prisoner late for evening check-in, the entire barracks would be punished by a 4 a.m. or even a 3:30 call and made to stand at parade attention until our backs ached and our legs cramped. But the summer air was warm and alive with birds as the day approached. Gradually in the east, a pink and gold sunrise would light the immense Brabant sky as Betsy and I squeezed each other's hands in awe. At 5:30, we had black bread and coffee, bitter and hot, and then fell into marching columns for the various work details. I looked forward to this hike to the Phillips factory. Part of the way, we walked beside a small woods, separated only by a roll of barbed wire from a glistening world of dewdrops. We also marched past a section of the men's camp, many of our group straining to identify a husband or a son among the ranks of shaved heads and striped overalls. This was another of the paradoxes of Vought. I was endlessly, daily grateful to be again with people. But what I had not realized in solitary confinement was that to have companions meant to have their griefs as well. We all suffered with the women whose men were in this camp. The discipline in the male section was much harsher than in the women's. Executions were frequent. Almost every day a salvo of shots would send the anguished whispers flying. How many this time? Who were they? The woman next to me at the relay bench was an intense communist woman named Fleur. She and her husband had managed to get their 2 small children to friends before their arrest, but she worried aloud all day about them and about Mr. Fleur, who had tuberculosis. He worked on the rope-making crew in the compound next to Phillips, and each noon they managed to exchange a few words through the barbed wire separating the 2 enclosures. Although she was expecting a 3rd child in September, she would never eat her morning allotment of bread, but passed it through the fence to him. She was dangerously thin, I felt, for an expectant mother, and several times I brought her a portion of my own breakfast bread. But this, too, was always set aside for Mr. Fleur. And yet, in spite of sorrow and anxiety, no one in that place was without both. There was laughter, too, in the Phillips barracks. An impersonation of the pompous, blustering second lieutenant. A game of blind man's bluff. A song passed in rounds from bench to bench until thick clouds, thick clouds. The signal might come from any bench which faced a window. The factory barracks was set in the center of the broad Phillips compound. There was no way a camp official could approach it without crossing this open space. In an instant, every bench would be filled, the only sound the businesslike rattle of radio parts. One morning, the code words were still being relayed down the long shed when a rather hefty officer stepped through the door. She glanced furiously about, face flushing scarlet as she applied thick clouds to her appearance. She shrieked and ranted for a quarter of an hour, then deprived us of our noontime break in the open air that day. After this, we adopted the more neutral signal, 15. I've assembled 15 dials. During the long, hot afternoons, pranks and talk died down as each one sat alone with his own thoughts. I scratched on the side of the table the number of days until September 1st. There was nothing official about that date, just a chance remark by Mrs. Fleur to the effect that 6 months was the usual prison term for ration card offenders. Then, if that were the charge, and if they included the time served at Scheveningen, September 1st would be our release date. Corey, Betsy warned one evening when I announced triumphantly that August was half over, we don't know for sure. I had the feeling almost that to Betsy, it didn't matter. I looked at her, sitting on our cot in the last moments before lights out, sewing up a split seam in my overalls as she had so often sat, mending under the lamplight in the dining room. Betsy, by the very way she sat, evoked a high-backed chair behind her and a carpet at her feet, instead of this endless row of metal cots on a bare pine floor. The first week we were here, she had added extra hooks to the neck of her overalls so that she could fasten the collar high around her throat. And this propriety taken care of, I had the feeling she was as content to be reading the Bible here in Vought to those who had never heard it, as she had been serving soup to hungry people in the hallway of the Bayet. As for me, I set my heart every day more firmly on September 1st. And then, All of a sudden, it looked as though we would not have to wait even this long. The Princess Irene Brigade was rumored to be in France, moving toward Belgium. The brigade was part of the Dutch forces that had escaped to England during the Five-Day War. Now, it was marching to reclaim its own. The guards were noticeably tense. Roll call was an agony. The old and the ill who were slow reaching their places were beaten mercilessly. Even the red light commando came in for discipline. These young women were ordinarily a favored group of prisoners. Prostitutes, mostly from Amsterdam, they were in prison not for their profession, which was extolled as a patriotic duty, but for infecting German soldiers. Ordinarily, with the male guards anyway, they had a bold, breezy manner. Now even they had to form ruler straight lines and stand hours at frozen attention. The sound of the firing squad was heard more and more often. One lunchtime, when the bell sounded to return to work, Mrs. Fleur did not appear at the bench beside me. It always took a while for my eyes to readjust to the dim factory after the bright sun outside. It was only gradually that I saw the hunk of black bread still resting at her place on the bench. There had been no husband to deliver it to. And so, hanging between hope and horror, we waited out the days. Rumor was all we lived on. The brigade was across the Dutch border. The brigade was destroyed. The brigade had never landed. Women who had stayed away from the whispered little prayer service around our cot now crowded close, demanding signs and predictions from the Bible. On the morning of September 1st, Mrs. Fleur gave birth to a baby girl. The child lived 4 hours. Several days later, we awoke to the sound of distant explosions. Long before the roll call whistle, the entire barracks was up and milling about in the dark between the cots. Was it bombs? Artillery fire? Surely the brigade had reached Brabant. This very day they might be in Wood. The scowls and threats of the guards when they arrived daunted us not at all. Everyone's mind had turned homeward. Everyone talked of what she would do first. "The plants will all be dead," said Betsy. "But we'll get some cuttings from Nolly. We'll wash the windows so the sun can come in." At the Phillips factory, Mr. Moorman tried to calm us. "Those aren't bombs, and certainly not guns. That's demolition work. Germans, they're probably blowing up bridges. It means they expect an attack, but not that it's here. It might not come for weeks." This dampened us a bit. But as the blasts came closer and closer, nothing could keep down hope. Now they were so near they hurt our ears. "Drop your lower jaw," Mr. Moorman called down the long room. "Keep your mouth open and it will save your eardrums." We had our midday meal inside, with the doors and windows closed. We'd been working again for an hour, or sitting at our benches, no one could work, when the order came to return to dormitories. With sudden urgency, women embraced husbands and sweethearts who worked beside them at Phillips. Betsy was waiting for me outside our barracks. "Corey, has the brigade come? Are we free?" "No, not yet. I don't know." "Oh, Betsy, why am I so frightened?" The loudspeaker in the men's camp was sounding the signal for roll call. No order was given here, and we drifted about aimlessly, listening we scarcely knew for what. Names were being read through the men's speaker, though it was too far away to make them out. And suddenly, an insane fear gripped the waiting women. A death-like silence now hung over both sides of the vast camp. The loudspeaker had fallen silent. We exchanged wordless looks. We almost feared to breathe. Then the rifle fire split the air. Around us, women began to weep. A second volley, a third. For 2 hours, the executions went on. Someone counted. More than 700 male prisoners were killed that day. Today on Christian Classics, we have been reading from The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom with John and Elizabeth Sherrill, published by the Fleming H. Revell Company.
You've been listening to Christian Classics, narrated by Lynn Brooks. This has been a production of the Bible Broadcasting Network.
And now from Wednesday, February 4th, 2026.
From the studios of the Bible Broadcasting Network, we present Christian Classics, reading from a book that has influenced the lives of many people. Our narrator is Lynn Brooks.
Today we'll be reading chapter 30 from The Hiding Place. There was little sleeping in our barracks that night, and no roll call the following morning. About 6 a.m. we were ordered to collect our personal things. Betsy and I put our belongings into the pillowcases we had brought from Scheveningen: toothbrushes, needles and thread, a small bottle of oil that had come in a Red Cross package. Nolly's blue sweater, which was the only thing we had brought with us when we left the quarantine camp 10 weeks before. I transferred the Bible and its bag from Betsy's back to my own. She was so thin, it made a visible bump between her shoulders. We were marched to a field where soldiers were passing out blankets from the backs of open trucks. As we filed past, Betsy and I drew two beautiful, soft new ones. Mine was white with blue stripes, Betsy's white with red stripes, obviously the property of some well-to-do family. About noon, the exodus from camp began. Through the drab streets of barracks we went, past the bunkers, through the maze of barbed wire compounds and enclosures, and at last onto the rough dirt road, through the woods down which we had stumbled that rainy night in June. Betsy hung hard to my arm. She was laboring for breath as she always did, and she had to walk any distance. March! Double time! I slipped my arm beneath Betsy's shoulders and half carried her the final quarter mile. At last the path ended, and we lined up facing the single track, over 1,000 women standing toe to heel. Farther along, the men's section was also at the siding. It was impossible to identify individuals among the shaved heads glistening in the autumn sun. At first, I thought our train had not come. Then I realized that these freight cars, standing on the tracks, were for us. Already, the men were being prodded aboard, clambering up over the high sides. We could not see the engine, just this row of small, high-wheeled European boxcars, stretching out of sight in both directions, machine guns mounted at intervals on the roof. Soldiers were approaching along the track, pausing at each car to haul open the heavy sliding door. In front of us, a gaping, black interior appeared. Women began to press forward. Clutching our blankets and pillowcases, we were swept along with the others. Betsy's chest was still heaving oddly after the rapid march. I had to boost her over the side of the train. At first, I could make out nothing in the dark car. Then, in a corner, I saw a tall, uneven shape. It was a stack of bread, dozens of flat, black loaves piled, one on top of another. A long trip, then. The small car was getting crowded. We were shoved back against the wall. 30 or 40 people were all that could fit in, and still the soldiers drove women over the side, cursing, jabbing with their guns. Shrieks rose from the center of the car, but still the press increased. It was only when 80 women were packed inside that the door thumped shut, and we heard iron bolts driven into place. Many women were sobbing and fainted, although in the tight-wedged crowd they remained upright. Just when it seemed certain that those in the middle must suffocate or be trampled to death, we worked out a kind of system where, by half sitting, half lying with our legs wedged around one another like members of a sledding team, we were able to get down on the floor of the car. Do you know what I am thankful for? Betsy's gentle voice startled me in that squirming madhouse. I am thankful that Father is in heaven today. Father. Oh, Father, how could I have wept for you? The warm sun beat down on the motionless train. The temperature in the packed car rose. The air grew foul. Beside me, someone was tugging at a nail in the ancient wood of the wall. At last, it came free. With the point, she set to work gouging the hole wider. Others around the sides took up the idea, and in a while, blessed whiffs of outside air began to circle about us. It was hours before the train gave a sudden lurch and began to move. Almost at once, it stopped again, then again crawled forward. The rest of the day and into the night it was the same, stopping, starting, slamming, jerking. Once, when it was my turn at the air hole, I saw in the moonlight trainmen carrying a length of twisted rail. Tracks ahead must be destroyed. I passed the news. Maybe they would not be able to repair them. Maybe we would still be in Holland when liberation came. Betsy's forehead was hot to my hand. The red light girl, between whose legs I was wedged, squeezed herself into an even tighter crouch so that Betsy could lie almost flat across my lap. I dozed, too, from time to time, my head on the shoulder of the friendly girl behind us. Once, I dreamed it was storming. I could hear the hailstones on Tante John's front windows. I opened my eyes. It really was hailing. I could hear it rattling against the side of the car. Everyone was awake now and talking. Another storm of hail, and then we heard a burst of machine gun fire from the roof of the train. "It's bullets!" Someone shouted. "They're attacking the train!" Again we heard that sound like tiny stones striking the wall, and again the machine guns answered. Had the brigade reached us at last? The firing died away. For an hour the train sat motionless. Then slowly we crawled forward. At dawn, someone called out that we were passing through the border town of Emmerich. We had arrived in Germany. For 2 more incredible days and 2 more nights, we were carried deeper and deeper into the land of our fears. Occasionally, one of the loaves of bread was passed from hand to hand, but not even the most elementary provision had been made for sanitation, and the air in the car was such that few could eat. And gradually, more terrible than the crush of bodies and the filth, the single obsession was something to drink. 2 or 3 times, when the train stopped, the door was slid open a few inches and a pail of water passed in. But we had become animals, incapable of plan or system. Those near the door got it all. At last, the morning of the 4th day, the train stopped again, and the door was opened its full width. Like infants, on hands and knees, we crawled to the opening and lowered ourselves over the side. In front of us was a smiling blue lake. On the far side, among sycamore trees, rose a white church steeple. The stronger prisoners hauled buckets of water from the lake. We drank through cracked and swollen lips. The train was shorter. The cars carrying the men had disappeared. Only a handful of soldiers, some of them looking no older than 15, were there to guard 1,000 women. No more were needed. We could scarcely walk, let alone resist. After a while, they got us into straggly columns and marched us off. For a mile, the road followed the shore of the lake, then left it to climb a hill. I wondered if Betsy could make it to the top, but the sight of trees and sky seemed to have revived her, and she supported me as much as I her. We passed a number of local people on foot and in horse-drawn wagons. The children especially seemed wonderful to me, pink-cheeked and healthy. They returned my stares with wide-eyed interest. I noticed, however, that the adults did not look at us, but turned their heads away as we approached. From the crest of the hill, we saw it, like a vast scar on the green German landscape. A city of low, gray barracks surrounded by concrete walls on which guard towers rose at intervals. In the very center, a square smokestack emitted a thin, gray vapor into the blue sky. Ravensbrück, Like a whispered curse, the word passed back through the lines. This was the notorious women's extermination camp, whose name we had heard even in Harlem. That squat, concrete building, that smoke disappearing in the bright sunlight. No, I would not look at it. As Betsy and I stumbled down the hill, I felt the Bible bumping between my shoulder blades. God's good news. Was it to this world that he'd spoken it? Now we were close enough to see the skull and crossbones posted at intervals on the walls to warn of electrified wiring along the top. The massive iron gates swung in. We marched between them. Acres of soot-gray barracks stretched ahead of us. Just inside the wall was a row of waist-high water spigots. We charged them, thrusting hands, arms, legs, even heads under the streams of water, washing away the stench of the boxcars. A squad of women guards in dark blue uniforms rushed at us, hauling and shouting, swinging their short, hard crops. At last, they drove us back from the faucets and herded us down an avenue between barracks. This camp appeared far grimmer than the one we had left. At least, in marches about Voot, we had caught sight of fields and woods. Here, every vista ended in the same concrete barrier. The camp was set down in a vast, man-made valley, rising on every side to those towering, wire-topped walls. At last, we halted. In front of us, a vast canvas tent roof, no sides, covered an acre or more of straw-strewn ground. Betsy and I found a spot on the edge of this area and sank gratefully down. Instantly, we were on our feet again. Lice! The straw was literally alive with them. We stood for a while, clutching blankets and pillowcases well away from the infested ground, but at last we spread our blankets over the squirming straw and sat on them. Some of the prisoners had brought scissors from Voot. Everywhere beneath the huge tent, women were cutting one another's hair. A pair was passed to us. Of course we must do the same. Long hair was folly in such a place. But as I cut Betsy's chestnut waves, I cried. Toward evening, there was a commotion at one end of the tent. A line of SS guards was moving across it, driving women out from under the canvas. We scrambled to our feet and snatched up our blankets as they bore down upon us. Perhaps 100 yards beyond the tent, the chase stopped. We stood about, uncertain what to do. Whether a new group of prisoners had arrived or what the reason was for driving us from the tent, no one knew. Women began spreading their blankets on the hard cinder ground. Slowly, it dawned on Betsy and me that we were to spend the night here, where we stood. We laid my blanket on the ground, stretched out side by side, and pulled hers over us. The night is dark, and I'm far from home. Betsy's sweet soprano was picked up by voices all around us. Lead thou me on. We were waked up sometime in the middle of the night by a clap of thunder and a deluge of rain. The blankets soaked through and water gathered in puddles beneath us. In the morning, the field was a vast, sodden swamp. Hands, clothes, and faces were black from the cinder mud. We were still wringing water from our blankets when the command came to line up for coffee. It was not coffee, but a thin liquid of approximately the same color, and we were grateful to get it as we shuffled double file past the makeshift field kitchen. There was a slice of black bread for each prisoner, too. Then nothing more, until we were given a ladle of turnip soup and a small boiled potato late in the afternoon. Today on Christian Classics, we have been reading from The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom with John and Elizabeth Sherrill, published by the Fleming H. Revell Company.
You've been listening to Christian Classics, narrated by Lynn Brooks. This has been a production of the Bible Broadcasting Network.
And so we conclude another couple of chapters, chapter 29 and 30, I believe, of The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you dropping by. If you have a comment or suggestion, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and otherwise we'll connect next time. God bless you. Goodbye.